Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is not dying. Honestly, outside of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero release, I haven't been hearing much bad about it of anything. I haven't heard anything bad about it outside of, the rank servers and like the online lobbies being like a bit clunky. But honestly, outside of that, I haven't heard anything bad about Sparking Zero, which I anticipated, by the way, because everything about Sparking Zero seemed like it was gonna click, and it seemed like Sparking Zero was gonna be like, the next great game that we have for 2024. But recently, Steam charts have been coming out about Sparking Zero losing 90% of its player base and essentially saying that Sparking Zero is dying. And I think Sparking Zero peaked at 120,000 people playing on Steam, and I forget which number is at now, but it's a large dip from what it was when the game first came out. And that's obviously not counting console players, because console players I feel like will have, a big chunk of that too, because I'm pretty sure it sold around like 3 million copies. So a game that sold around 3 million copies just doesn't, die and fall off of the face of the earth that fucking quickly. But today I'm here to tell you that Sparking Zero is not dying, it's just that fighting games are niche.
Now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, before using Dubby, I was a father of 12. But now, after Dubby, I'm a deadbeat dad. Let's see what we got in here for the Dubby. We got the motherfucking. We got the motherfucking. Oh shit. So the first flavor of Dubby, we have peach and beet.
You what?
Second flavor of Dubby, we got the dragon milk. Next flavor we have laxative.
What?
Laxy grenade. Next flavor we have this is a zero sugar powder pack. And last but certainly not least, we have Heinz Berry Splash. I'm Wasabi, and this has been your Dubby advertisement.
But like I said earlier, Sparking Zero is not dying. It's just at the end of the day, fighting games are just that niche. At the end of the day, no matter what you say about Sparking Zero, at its core, it is a fighting game. Mainly the people who bought Sparking Zero are just going to play through the story modes, play through the what if scenarios, and then they're going to get off the game until they play at a tournament with their friends at their house on a couch, just laying back having fun. They're not going to be playing ranked, because at the end of the day, Sparking Zero is a fighting game. Fighting games are not made for the mass majority of people. The mass majority of people, when they play a fighting game, they'll play through the story mode, they'll play with their friends every now and again, but they're not going to be playing ranked. Especially in a game like Sparking Zero, which isn't, designed around balance. If you played any of the old Budokai games, you know that none of those games are balanced at all. And that's on purpose to make the characters more lore accurate and everything else. Every character in that game does 3 or 4 things that's broke, every single one of them. There is no real balance to a game like that. And there is no real meta to it, because it's not a game meant to be taken seriously. Now, will there be people who take, Sparking Zero seriously and be having tournaments and all the other type of shit? Yes, because at the end of the day, Sparking Zero is a fighting game. And fighting games foster a competitive community, no matter what fighting game it is. Whether it's Smash Brothers, whether it's Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Tekken, Street Fighter, Blaze Blue, Grand Blue, Fatal Fury, whatever it is, if it's a fighting game, it's gonna foster a competitive community with people, learning, metas and techs, and, the best team comp and the best, counters. People, that type of community is going to foster, because at the end of the day, it's a fighting game. Now, I'm not saying that fighting games can't be popular, because Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is going to be a popular game for years to come, especially if they add good DLC to it down the road. But fighting games are not going to be popular with the mass majority of people, because the mass majority of people don't care about getting good at a fighting game. The mass majority of people, when they play a fighting game, just want to turn it on and button mash with their friends on their couch, just, having a good time. They don't care about, winning tournaments or, being good at the game. They don't care about that. So when I first heard that people were saying that, Sparking Zero was dying, I immediately disagreed with it, because a game like Sparking Zero isn't gonna die because of the fact that 120,000 people aren't playing it anymore. That's not a game, dying per se. And Sparking Zero being a fighting game means that it's only going to have a certain amount of popularity. Fighting games have become very, very, very popular along the years. Street Fighter 6 is a great game, Tekken 8 is a great game, but they're never going to be more popular than, say, Elden Ring. They're not going to be more popular than Black Myth Wukong. They'll sell a lot of copies, especially once they first come out. They'll sell a lot of copies, but it won't have, you know, a mass amount of players playing it, because at the end of the day, it's a fighting game. Fighting games don't have, you know, 120,000 people playing them daily. That's not what fighting games do, because there's only so much you can do after the story mode. There's only so much you can do after, you know, the what if scenarios if you're playing Sparking Zero, because if you would just avoid online ranked, you know, completely, there's only so much that you can do outside of just playing with your friends, which is what majority of people bought the game for. Majority of people bought the game just to play with their friends. Budokai Tenkaichi games were never meant to be like in a competitive setting, but they're gonna be in a competitive setting, especially in modern day, because it's a fighting game and because people are gonna, you know, wanna see who's the best and see who's gonna be, you know, like the #1 Broly or the #1, you know, Super Saiyan 3 Goku and stuff like that. Very similar to fighters, but more in the way of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is the Smash Brothers of the Dragon Ball games. And I say that it's the Smash Brothers of the Dragon Ball games because yes, Smash Brothers has its own competitive scene, but that is for the very, very like minute, you know, part of the community. 99% of people who play Smash Brothers do not take it seriously enough to be competitive at it. 99% of people probably don't even know that a competitive, you know, scene for Smash Brothers exists. Obviously, you know, people who play a lot of games and are around competitive scenes know that Smash Brothers has a competitive scene, but the majority of people who play Smash Brothers just, you know, play it if like they had like a party or something like that, or they just have like a bunch of their friends over, like, you know, just to play around and, you know, throw items at each other and everything like that. None of them are going to be doing Fox only, Final Destination, no items in Smash Brothers because they don't care that much. And as a fighting game player myself, I'm not surprised that a lot of people dropped Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, because I knew that at the core, people don't care about getting good at a fighting game. They only care to get good enough to beat their friends. They don't care to climb the leaderboard. They don't care to be, you know, ranked really high. They don't care about any of that shit. And truth be told, they never will. So when Dragon Ball, you know, got announced that it was having, you know, like way lower player count than it did when it first came out, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised that Sparking Zero, you know, player count dropped by 90%. Honestly, I thought it would drop by more, if I'm being completely honest with you. But I'm not surprised that the player base dropped by 90%. I would have been surprised if it didn't drop by 90%. And games like Sparking Zero don't necessarily really die, because even if, like, you know, online isn't as popular as people like want it to be or thought it would be, games like Sparking Zero never really die. Because in my eyes, it's kind of like saying, you know, a game like Black Myth Wukong is dead, but Black Myth Wukong is not a multiplayer game. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is a party game. It's not a multiplayer game. It's not a multiplayer live service game that depends on, you know, the multiplayer space, you know, being alive for it to be considered, you know, in a live game. That's not what Sparking Zero is for. And that's not what it's meant to be. Sparking Zero is meant to be a party game. It's meant to be, you know, a story game, just like the other Dragon Ball games, where every Dragon Ball game except for Fighters is meant to be played for the story and meant to be played with your friends. It's not gonna be at Evo. It's not gonna be at any of these, like, you know, big fighting game tournaments. They might be at a couple of small fighting game tournaments, but it's not gonna be the next, you know, Street Fighter or the next Tekken. Nobody is gonna really take a Dragon Ball Sparking Zero tournament scene seriously, except for like the people who really love the game like that. So it sounds kind of weird when I hear people say that Sparking Zero is dead or is dying, because a game like Sparking Zero doesn't die. It just moves on. Like, Sparking Zero isn't like, you know, X-Defiant or Call of Duty, where it's kind of really dependent on its player base playing the multiplayer part of the game. That's not what Sparking Zero is. That's just like saying that Smash Brothers is dead because you don't really hear about it a lot, you know, the current, you know, gaming news cycle and stuff like that. Smash Bros. Ultimate is still very much alive. A lot of people still play the game. Now, how many people play the game, like, you know, online and stuff? That's a different story. But at the end of the day, I don't think that Sparking Zero is dead or is gonna die, because in order for Sparking Zero to die, it would have to be a multiplayer live service game, which is not. Sparking Zero is a party game and a story game that's meant to be played with your friends, and you're meant to play through the story mode. You're not meant to, you know, only play Sparking Zero through the online or through the multiplayer or through the rank ladder. That's not what Sparking Zero was made for. Sparking Zero was made just like how the other 99% of Dragon Ball games are made, to play through the story and to play with, you know, the iconic anime characters that we all watch. So no, Sparking Zero is not dying.